Well, welcome, folks, and I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting today on the territory of the Snawas and Qualicum First Nations, and thank them for allowing us to live, work, and play in this beautiful part of the island, and their stewardship of these lands is phenomenal. So our catchment area boundaries town hall, I will turn over to Dr. Peter Jory to walk us through the process and highlights of what we need to ponder. And of course, there's a survey at the end to follow up, but
yeah,
he'll allude to that, I'm sure. Over to you,
absolutely
Dr.
will.
Jordan.
Thanks, Chair Flynn. And I can see you, Chair Flynn. So could you give me the thumbs up if you see catchment conversation? Okay, awesome. All right. Hello, everyone. Bonjour, Esquale. Thank you very much for coming and joining us this evening, or as is increasingly the case, watching this video recording at a later date. I'm glad to have you along, even if it's not in real time. Let me see if I can get my slideshow to actually work online. Aha, here we go. Here's the agenda. We've started the recording. Our Chair Flynn has welcomed and acknowledged the territory. I would like for Chair Flynn to just circle back and mention the trustees and the staff who are present. Could I impose on you to do that, Chair?
Okay, I don't have a full screen, but
How about now?
I suspect we have our superintendent, Dr. Peter Jory, Associate Superintendent, Ms. Jillian Wilson, Director of Operations, Bill Monroe. I'm sure Mr. Amos is here somewhere, our Secretary Treasurer. Trustees present, Carol Kellogg, Vice Chair of the district, Trustee Elaine Young, who's now back on screen. I think there will be absence from Trustee Kurland. Let me go to participants. Who have I missed? Our very capable and stalwart recording secretary, Ms. Karen Hurt, keeps us out of trouble. Mr. Rudy Terpstra, Director of Instruction, is also here, along with some senior members of our principals and vice principal team. Is that enough, Dr. Jory?
How about Director of HR, Ryan Brennan? Give us a wave, Ryan.
He's
on my screen, not yours, apparently.
Okay. And our Director of Human Resources, Labor Relations, Ryan Brennan. Thank you all for joining us as well from the public and beyond. And over to you again, Dr. Jory.
Okay, all right. Thanks, and I'll just go get my slide back in position here. Sorry if it's just a little awkward. Okay, all right. Here is the agenda again. So here's what it looks like for the balance of the session. We'll do a quick review of public participation and some facilities terminology. We'll do a review of Qualicum School District school capacities and enrollment projections, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the meaning of capacity because there's a lot of different ways to interpret that information. We'll do a deeper review of responses to enrollment pressures. I'll go through the different kinds of things that a Board of Education might do during changes in enrollment. We will show the catchment change proposals that we're asking the board to consider. We'll kind of go through that in some detail. We'll also, and prior to going to that, do a little review of what we did last time we did this, which was 4 years ago now. We'll open it up for some questions and clarifications just to make sure that we've covered all the things that we need to cover. And then there'll be some clarification for the different ways that you can provide us with input. And there will be, in addition to the Q&A at the end, there will be a survey that will be open, and I will also share an email that I have access to that you could send some further questions or comments if you choose to do so. Okay, now I'm going to go over here. A little bit fussy with my controller here. Oh, I know, because it has to go to space first is the problem, and so it's really slow. That's not very good. Bear with me. Wish we could edit this stuff out in real time, but it's not. It's not advancing for me. That's very unusual. I am normally, I'm just going to get out of it and go back into it again. Normally quite a whiz bang with technology. Let's see if it works this time around.
And I'd like to acknowledge also that I forgot Julie Austin. I didn't see her on my participant list, but I believe she's here. So the trustees.
Oh, I know what's going on. Okay,
Nothing's.
Okay, here we go. I got it. My little cursor was stuck in a place where it wasn't wanting to advance. All right, on to the first part of the presentation. This is a little slide I like to show people whenever we get into a public consultation process. It's the IAP2 public participation spectrum. And IAP2 is an organization that focuses on, is expert in public participation. And this is a little piece of information that I like to share on the front of any kind of work that we do. And it's just basically to establish the range of input and the consideration of that input that a public body it uses when they engage. And I'll just, right across the top, you can see inform on the left, and then it goes consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. And the gist of this is, on the right-hand side, empower means the body is turning that decision over entirely to you, the public. And in public education, that happens fairly rarely. And the one example I like to share is when there's a board election. That is a chance for you, the public, to vote. Whichever trustees get the most votes, they win those chairs. That's empowerment. Over on the left-hand side, we have inform. And that is just when something happens, it's not really up to the public. It's legislation. It is, some kind of emergent situation. Not really going to check in with you, just going to tell you what we have to do. There's not much to talk about there. That's the left side. Most of the work that a school district does occurs in the middle three columns. And what I'll say is a process like this really is more consult than anything else. There is a number of factors that the board will consider, and I'll show you that in a second. But ultimately, it is up to the board to make this decision. So what are they going to look at? Financial implications, collective agreements, transportation, facility capacity, enrollment projections, and yes, stakeholder input. They will look at your input. What I'll do is I will collect survey response. Of course, they'll listen to you if you participate in the end of this meeting. But I will collect the responses in the email. I'll collect the responses in a survey. I will give them the hard copy versions or straight versions of those, unedited. And then I will also do a summary for them. And they will factor that into their decision-making process when they vote. And for those of you that are interested in when that might occur, we're going to try to get this in front of them for the January meeting. They may decide to deliberate on it for longer than that. Perhaps they will wait till the February meeting to make a decision. That's completely up to them. But we would like for them to be able to make a decision before our deadline, if possible. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Stages of enrollment pressure, the common language, the vernacular of enrollment. If it is at 70% or less, we will typically say in this business, it's below capacity. Maybe even underutilized is another way we might state that. Approaching capacity as we get between 70 and 90% of the number of students that we can fit in a building. At capacity would be considered, would be an accurate term when we get to between 90 and 100%. Exceeding capacity for schools that are over the 100% of stated capacity, and perhaps we've introduced some flexible spaces, portables or whatnot, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then what I do want to illustrate before we move on in the presentation is sometimes, and in some spaces, it's easier than in other times and in other spaces to exceed that stated capacity. And I'll give you a really easy example. If you have an elementary school, you're limited by class size. You are in all schools, actually. If you have a high number of intermediate classes where the class size is 30, and you have a smaller number of kindergarten or intermediate classes where your numbers are 22 or 20 or 22 or 24, you're going to be able to get a larger number of students into that school. And if your primary cohorts are larger, you're going to get fewer students into that school. Okay, so there's some of the logic there. The capacities that we use currently, and I'll show you in a moment, these are more reflective of nominal capacity, okay, which is more of an ideal number, and we'd like to perceive of these numbers as targets. That doesn't mean that they don't have any meaning. It just means that in some schools, in some periods of time, depending on enrollment, we may be able to exceed those numbers, and maybe by quite a bit. I'll give you a really quick example. When I first started teaching, it was the 90s, there were an up enrollment. I worked in a school that had a nominal capacity of about 350. Well, that enrollment surged from 400 to 450 to almost 500 students. And I taught English in the library, in the shop, in the foods room. I didn't like it very much. But those were some of the responses we had in that space to work through this surge in enrollment. On to our previous projections and our estimated capacities. This is what we showed you in 4 years ago when we did this process. And this was a different time. At this particular time, we were in increasing enrollment. We had a surge of students coming. We had the upside of the wave of enrollment that has flowed out in ripples from the baby boom many years ago. Migration was a significant factor in Canada. Hundreds of thousands of people were coming to our country from other countries. We also had migration across the country. 150,000 or more people were coming per year to British Columbia, and a number of those people were coming to Vancouver Island. And so we see projections here that are very, very positive or up. And we had a number of places where we were perhaps concerned about enrollment and needed to talk about our capacity. And of course, the punchline is, in the last 4 years, a number of things have changed, and we've reached the top of that wave of enrollment, and we're in decline in regard to our own demographics, and fewer people are coming to Canada because legislation and the means and the processes have been all dialed down, and as a result, fewer people are moving to British Columbia and perhaps even to Vancouver Island. I mean, even interest rates is probably a factor. But it doesn't look like this so much anymore. And I'll show you where it looks like in a moment. When we have growth enrollment, when we have changes in enrollment, there are some things a school district can do. And this is a fairly complete list, as I've called it. We can extend existing space by converting some of the learning spaces or some spaces into standard classrooms. And these pictures are from the last round. I think that's a picture on the right of the multi-room in Springwood, which we temporarily used as a classroom. And one of the reasons we're doing this process is to try to avoid having to go back to that in the future. And the one on the left, I think, is the classroom, the so-called classroom under the stairs, or the Harry Potter classroom. Those are just ways that the building was buildings were modified in order to have more standard classrooms. That's one example of something you can do. If you want to be more aggressive about this, or you have more challenges that need to be faced, you could go to your flexible learning spaces, your specialized spaces, as we sometimes call them, and turn them into standard classrooms. So I want to just mention that this is a response that you can do in an elementary school in order to increase your enrollment capacity. I can also tell you that this is not a popular choice in the Qualicum School District. I heard that loud and clear 4 years ago. I hear that from time to time from our current board. And so I would say that we're not putting these ideas forward to the board, and we wouldn't unless we were in more dire straits than I think we are now. Another option is to reactivate latent space. In other words, reopen sections of closed schools. These are pictures from the Parksville, the former Parksville Elementary, these are some classrooms that got some new flooring in there and so on. But going farther with this, of course, would be rather expensive, and also would force people to go from a school that they're in, which is in probably very, very good operating condition and has all kinds of assets there, into a place where it's just not as new, it's not as nice, it doesn't have as much, and in fact has other issues. And so once again, we're not bringing this one forward to the Board of Education. It's something we would maybe only consider bringing forward if we were in more dire situations than a more dire situation than we are now. Portables, of course, is a standard response to increases in enrollment. We've had some portables on at our school sites from time to time. Those are, I think, actually ours. The ones on the left were over at Winchelsea before. They're now gone. They are expensive. We have to pay for them out of our core funding. We don't get ministry funding for that. They are going to cost 150 to 200,000 or more dollars if you can get them, and you have to have a room to place them. You have to have room to place them. And when we were in discussion regarding Springwood reaching capacity or exceeding capacity last time around, one of the issues is we can't put a portable there. The only place, well, you can, I guess, but the only place where we had room before, I believe, was in the location where we now have our brand new playground. And so, and other than that, I don't think there's a space where one would even fit. And because, and if you don't know this, we don't own that property. As soon as you go up the bank and up to the next flat area, that's not us anymore. That's the city. So, if we're going to put a portable, it has to be on our land, and etc. So, not necessarily a good choice for us. Modulars, same problem. Nicer, lifespans longer. You should get 60 years out of a modular. When people actually move into them, they tend to like them very much. They're often, very similar or equivalent to being in a new, new school building or a new school addition. But once again, you need space and you need money, and we don't have either of those two things to access. And of course, I don't want to forget just building additions to current buildings, or there's the school site again. And we're talking about maybe, if there's any kind of conversation about opening up the entirety of the Craig Street Commons, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars. And once again, you need ministry money. And I do want to put this caveat out there. Before the ministry will smile upon us, we would have to show that we have done all the other things that were possible prior to consideration. If anything was feasible to do, we would have to do that, including buying portables, including considering modulars, making sure that those specialty spaces were actually classrooms, et cetera, et cetera. And so that kind of puts us in a different position there. And of course, what we are bringing forward, and the reason we're having this meeting, is to redraw catchment boundaries to divert students to schools that actually have capacity. And what I will also say is this is a very standard practice all around the world. It is used very frequently in British Columbia. Some school districts have these conversations annually. Some of the urban districts have to be very, very careful about their catchment lines, because their school enrollments can be very volatile, and they've got to make sure that they are maximizing their space and providing the best possible and the greatest possible learning opportunities for their students there. We are fortunate here in that we don't have to do this very frequently. It's been 4 years. Maybe we'll have to do this again in a few years. My hope is that we won't have to do this again for quite a while. Again, it is a standard practice. It is a tool that school districts use quite frequently. And as you can tell from the previous, compared to the previous slides, as much as this may create some friction or imposition or other kinds of issues, it is much less expensive. It's less invasive, and it's more feasible than many of the other ones that I've shared with you this evening. I think it's the lesser of those issues for sure. Here's an update on current projections. As of December, Trustee Secretary Treasurer Ron Amos went into our Bearer account and did a bit of a deep dive, gave me the updates. I'll show you the new maps in a moment. And again, I'll review estimated capacity, nominal capacity down that left-hand column. We can exceed those numbers in some cases quite comfortably, in some other cases not so comfortably. And I'll put it on the table. We've had, 1,000, 1,100, even as many as 1,200 students at Ballenas. Probably had some portables there. It's not ideal, but we certainly have done it. And as we go down that column, you can see, the rest of those numbers. That's roughly where we're at. And we've been over that capacity in Springwood, a number of times in recent years. As I've described, you use the space a little more aggressively, sure, but we've also had larger cohorts in that intermediate end where you can have larger number of kids proportionally and have more kids in the school as a result. I would like you to note the trends here. And if you look across the bottom, first of all, you can see that total population in our schools, the school-based population, is trending down. A very different story than 4 years ago. And so currently we're at about 4,200. We're going to go down a little bit more. And if everything goes as Berger predicts, will be under 4,000 in 5 or 6 years down the road. You can also see that if you scroll across to all of our elementary schools, aside from the ones that are in red, you're mostly seeing stability or some decline, right? Arrow views going down, or kind of steady-ish. Bowser kind of holds. Arrington, goes down a little bit, then seems to or kind of level. News Bay is the one that's really interesting to me because, we're at 316 or so now, and it looks like it's dropping fairly steeply. And of course, this is one of the reasons we would like to, make some changes here, not just in anticipation of the things that we are already seeing, but anticipation of some of the things that we're hearing when we talk to some of our community partners. Qualicum Beach, down but then steady. Springwood, up a bit, but then leveling off. But I will say this, we're not, that's great, but Berger doesn't know about that big condo complex that's on the corner that we can all see that will be coming online, within the next year or 2 or 3, and it's going to, we assume, fill up with people, and we assume that there's going to be some children in there. We've had a number of condos come online in the Parksville area that have very few or literally no children, but we have to operate in anticipation that there's going to be more pressures. And as is the will of the board, we would like for those neighborhood kids, wherever they are, to be able to attend their home school. That's stated in policy, and so it makes sense to us to start to make changes away from the building. Students that may already be riding a bus, if you're going to have buildings coming online that are literally in sight of the building, it would be nice for those kids, if they move into those buildings, to be able to walk to school 2 blocks. That makes more sense than saying, okay, we don't have space for you. You're going to have to be going somewhere else. And so what we're trying to do here, or what we're going to show you in a minute, is a means for us to hopefully create some space in our schools, so that kids can go to the one that's closest to them. And then at the bottom, École Oceanside, that's both French and English. We'll talk a little bit about the differences in the 2 groups, but ultimately the building is the building, and that's the way that it looks like it's going. I will just reach back in time to our prior town hall meetings, and what we called phase 1 at the time. We did the meetings in 20, we started kind of the conversation in 21. We had a meeting like this very much like this in 22. sorry. Yeah. 20, no, we started in 22. We activated for September of 23. And essentially, we're kind of dealing with the same pressures, if you recall. And here's what we did to try to modify the enrollments and encourage people to go to the schools where there was space. And one of those places, profoundly, was École Oceanside. The English side at the time was down to about 70 kids. And so there was room there. And in fact, we were very encouraging of students to go to École Oceanside because we wanted that English side to be more robust. We wanted it to have more of a school culture, and we felt that it needed to have more kids on that side to be able to really maximize all of that potential. So we moved the boundary line on the north side of the Island Highway, starting at Molliette over, we call it the Temple Street neighborhood, and move that over. We grandfather, that's not the term we use anymore, I guess. We're gonna switch that to legacy, but we gave the SES students returning to Springwood families, they chose to remain there. Okay, so but then we closed the Springwood boundaries on a go forward basis, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, that's just the way that it works. We rerouted Temple Bus. And we did it. We did and we didn't. Like, we got better service going to Oceanside. We didn't actually ever shut off the service coming the other way. And so there are still about 6 kids that used to be in the Springwood catchment in the Temple neighborhood on this end of it, that were still driving to school. And so, we never actually capped that. We never actually stopped that service. We did open an afternoon program at Oceanside, and we think that was helpful. There was a multi-grade grouping PLC that was at Craig Street, that we moved to over to Oceanside. And of course, we kept the French immersion program at Oceanside, and there was a little bit of conversation about potentially moving it somewhere, but that didn't go anywhere at all. And we don't have any appetite in bringing something like that to the board. And when one of my senior staff colleagues brought up the possibility of having this conversation, I started throwing things. So that probably won't happen anytime soon. Here's phase 2. And by the way, back in phase 1, this is just the in-town changes. We did do some work up around the perimeters. There were some changes to the bus routes and the catchments on the other side of the new highway. Some students that were going to Arrington and had a long bus ride, were changed over to Qualicum Beach. Bus rides were shortened, and there was a little bit of a rebalancing out there. It's not really germane to this conversation, but it was part of that conversation, and we think it was helpful at that time. So into the potential next steps here. Phase 2 recommendations. Now, these are the changes that we identified to the board 4 years ago as possibles to consider later. We said we'll come back to these only if we think they're necessary. And I've got mixed feelings about not making these changes at the time. And I'll walk through those a little bit now, but you don't know how it's all going to go. Some of these factors that have changed fairly dramatically were not necessarily predictable. So until you know, or until you have more information, it's maybe not good to make changes. Pym Street boundary east to reduce Springwood Elementary catchment. Okay, so we will be talking about that today. Move San Periel neighborhood to reduce Bay Elementary to reduce Springwood. We didn't do it then. We will be talking about it now, and then some, and we'll talk about why. For any San Periel parents who are online or watching this later, I just want to recognize that, yes, we did do a survey last year. I was curious as to, are you still out there? Are you engaged in this conversation? Is there any chance that you would just, decide to go to News Bay, I guess is what I was kind of getting at, without a catchment change? And thank you for your responses. I think I got about, I don't know, 15 or 20. And the gist of it is, if we want to keep going to the schools we're going, and we like the bus service that we're getting. And in fact, if you could even do more bus service, we would like that. So yeah, that's the gist of it. So thank you for your contributions. We're going to talk about what this might look like going forward. Item 3, adjust the Qualicum Road boundary east to reduce air view catchment. We don't need to do that, we don't think. There were pressures in that school. If you saw the previous slides, they're not there anymore. We see that population stabilizing, and then move Columbia Beach neighborhood to École Oceanside Elementary to reduce the Arrowview catchment. Again, stable enrollment, not feeling the pressures. No need to adjust that boundary, we don't think. And then item 5 is a bit of a bigger conversation. Really, it's a go forward conversation. You'll see what I mean in a second, but move the secondary school boundary east to reduce the Ballenas secondary catchment. And so I'll save my comments on that until we put that slide up. So here we go with phase 2. But before we do, what do our policies and admin procedures say about all this stuff? And so before I show these slides, it's nice to just say, we should give you fair notice, and that is the right thing to do. So anything that we're going to do for September, we should have that decision. The board should have that decision made by March 1st of the previous year. So as I said in the introductions, January or February decisions would be the latest board meeting, actual regular scheduled board meeting that would allow this to be activated for September. That's reasonable. It gives you several months to get organized if you have to do that. And also, and this is incredibly important, because I think people out there might be thinking, oh my goodness, do I have to move my kid right away? Am I going to be forced out of my school? And the answer is no. We don't do that. Families, I know you're going to get asked, I guess, but we have to ask if you're staying. But if you're in a school, you're in a school. Unless you decide to transfer to your catchment school. Once you're in that school, this is legacy status. You are deemed to be a member of that school community. Okay, so that's a relief. If you have a grade 5 student attending Springwood, your student has legacy status. They are a member of that school community. The second part of this is if you have younger siblings coming into the system, they get priority. Now, what this technically says here is, well, they get in too, and yes, but there's a caveat to that. And I want to be really careful, is that there has to be some room there. If we're absolutely full or over capacity, and we're going to be, violating class sizes and getting into this other set of challenges, we might not be able to do that. And that's the only reason. And one of the reasons that we do this rebalancing, that we do this work and try to do it in advance, is so that we don't end up in these difficult positions. And so I'm hopeful that siblings will get in, and that's ostensibly what happened last round. We didn't end up leaving anybody behind. So I want to be really clear about that. If you're enrolled in a school and you want to stay in that school, if your child's enrolled in a school, they want to stay in that school, you want them to stay in that school, they're in. And if you've got younger siblings coming in, if there's room, they're prioritized. And so this should work out for you. So really what's going on is every change that we make, unless you voluntarily move, and that does happen somewhat, it's on a go forward basis. So new kids coming to town, new kids moving to neighborhoods, kids changing levels, which was a bit of a factor. You may be going to not the school that you thought you were going to. And so, yes, we will see some changes, but it's always on a go forward basis, really, unless you want to voluntarily move. In regard to that, and I don't want to labor the point, when we did the changes last time, and I mentioned 70 students on the English side at Oceanside. Well, in very short order, I think for the following school year, we had 110, and then it went to 120 something, and then we're up to 130 and 140 within just a few years. And so all those measures moved people to go there more voluntarily, and some people, came online or moved to that neighborhood, and they ended up there because of the catchment changes. But it happened very, very quickly, um, which was amazing because it really genuinely helped us out at Springwood and allowed us to have that multi back as a multi, but it also helped us over at Oceanside, we think, and created this more robust school culture on the English side. Okay, item number one, Springwood and Oceanside boundary from Wrens to Pym. So, and anyone who's online that got the message that said Molliette, I apologize to you profusely. Um, it was always Wrens to Pym, and I created this message based on my slides. And then, if some reason, I just looked at it and went, and then I fixed it, and then I went, oh, and then we had to do a retraction. It was my mistake. It's always been Wrens to Pym. It's a very small box. If I show you the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that rectangle right down there. It basically surrounds Ballenas. Okay, that rectangle we're going to propose goes the students there go to Springwood. In the future, going forward, we're going to recommend that they go to Oceanside. And the good news is that is a busing hub. Students walk all from that neighborhood to Ballenas to transfer buses, and they go here and there and everywhere, including Oceanside. And yes, there is room on that Oceanside bus. And so I was over at the transportation department the other day going through all this. I've made some changes based on their feedback. But yes, if you're in that neighborhood, instead of walking over there and getting on a bus to Springwood, we're going to recommend you get on that bus to Oceanside. And of course, new people coming online, new students coming online, new students moving to the neighborhood. Yes, you're going to be going to Oceanside if this is approved by the Board of Education. Not a monumental change in numbers, but over time we think that it's going to make enough of a difference to make it worthwhile. Next, and this one's a little more complicated. East of the Englishman River, including San Periel, to Nanoose Bay Elementary. Bigger numbers. Originally, the conversation was San Periel. And if you look inside the blue circle, it's not really a circle, it's a blob. There's a lighter, it's kind of rectangular shape in there. That's the San Periel neighborhood, or Secretary Treasurer Ron Amos's depiction of it. What we've done through conversation and feedback is expand this area somewhat. And there's a number of reasons for that. Number one, we think that we're going to need to do something a little bit more profound to make sure that Springwood stays at or below capacity over time. Number two, there is a number of builds going on in that larger blue blob, that boundary area. Our friends at the city of the town of Parksville have approved some subdivisions, a complex, maybe a fairly large set of townhomes and such. And those students, we need space for them. The good news is this: if you remember back from our slide, Nanoose Bay is projected. Its nominal capacity is 390. So take that for what it's worth. But its projected enrollment 5-6 years from now is down to just about 220. And so there's a whole community that we think can go to that school, and there's going to be room for them there. I think we can work this out so the bus rides are going to be perhaps even express or somewhat like that. And so we're quite up on that. And for those of you that don't know anything about Nanoose Bay and are curious, I would absolutely recommend going and checking it out. It's a lovely school, fantastic location, and it has one of the best playgrounds in the entire school district. So I think this is going to be well received. And remember, yeah, on a go forward basis, if you are going to Springwood, your child's going to Springwood and you want to remain at Springwood, then you will have the opportunity to do that. I'm very certain. So I think I kind of covered that one not too badly. As you can see on the right-hand side, the larger green area is maybe a little bit easier to see, and you can see there's a number of dots in there where people are located and following along the river. And this, of course, the bus consultation was very significant here because it's just it just works a lot better for them as well, and we can shorten those routes up and make them more efficient. They don't want to have to go. Well, you can only get over the river on the bridge, so that's why it's a natural boundary there. On to high school. The next recommendation here is to move the boundary between KSS and BSS, and this is English track. Okay, so all these dots are English track students, to be clear. We have a fairly large area in between those. It's not super densely populated, but it does have a number of kids in there. And I think this boundary on the left-hand side traditionally has been French Creek. And so what we're proposing, and I named the roads and so on, but okay, French Creek is actually a better way to depict it. And we'd be moving that east, and the boundaries would be roughly Lowry's, I believe. It would go over to the arena, the skating rink, right? Kind of moves a bit into Salt Pizzeria, if you know where that is, and then to the water, and then to French Creek Marina. One of the areas, and this I think is where some feedback may be helpful to the overall decision making. If you are in that little bump out there, and I'm talking about the one on the right-hand side of the yellow shaded area, you might have a student there that's attending Ballenas, or you might be living there. You might be living there, which is probably more pertinent, and your student hasn't gone to Ballenas yet. You might say, well, this is how we would get to Ballenas. It would be much easier for us to do this than to go to KSS. There's buses going every which way, and we can work on that. But I understand that was sort of kind of up in the air for us. So if you're in that zone and you have something to say, I think we're going to pay extra attention to that. But for the purpose of this exercise, for the purpose of the consultation, we did include it because we captured some students and we thought we could balance these schools a little bit more effectively over the long run. Again, it's really on a go forward basis. And the purpose is not to create equal numbers of students at both schools. That's, not really how it all plays out. But if you saw the projections, if you looked at them or went back in the video and looked at them, we'd see that KSS is really projected to go under 700, and BSS is projected to go well over 1,000. And so this is an attempt to rebalance this somewhat and over time maintain the numbers that we have right now, roughly, which is to say something around 1,000 at Ballenas and something around 800 at KSS, if we can do that. So that's the intention here. We hope that 3, 4, 5 years from now that this will kind of work in the way that we are hoping it will, and that balance will be maintained something to the degree that it is now. I can tell you though, and you can see it in this map, and it's a good time to talk about it, our boundaries are very porous. There's lots of movement back and forth. And this is the English track. This is not even the French immersion. If you look at the French immersion, they're all over the place. Because students have gone to, they've been in the Ballenas catchment and they go to KSS, or they're in the KSS catchment and they go to Ballenas. And there's lots of reasons to go back and forth, friends, programs, you can get a ride, any of those. You just, you want something that is over there. We're pretty accommodating around that. And what we found is that, there's been often a little bit of trading back and forth in the sense that, you have several going this way and then you have several going that way. And a lot of the time it balances out or almost balances out. But we do see enrollment trends over time, not really, I think, due so much to migration, but due to demographics and groups of kids coming up through the system that is going to create this imbalance. And we just want to see if we can work and prevent that from happening too much. So we'll put this to the board, and I hope that was enough of an explanation for people. Oh yeah, in closing, this is not a presentation on busing. It's not intended to be a busing presentation, but here's a couple of things I think, we should share. I think it's fair to share them in advance. I don't like people to, feel like they're making decisions without information that might be pertinent to those decisions. I don't think that's fair. We don't know what we're going to do next in busing, and I will put that on the table. But I do want to make a couple comments here because they may be helpful to you. Legacy status at a school, as per policy 704, does not create legacy status in our transportation system. Okay, there's no policy that says if you go to Springwood and you're catching a bus to Springwood, that you're always going to have that bus to Springwood, even if you can remain in Springwood. So let me just put that on the table just for transparency's sake. Remember that. That being said, it has been our typical practice to continue on with service well after catchment changes have occurred. And I talked earlier about the 6 or so students, maybe it's 8, that are on the very, the Parksville end of the Temple neighborhood, still getting a ride 4 years later. Maybe somewhat of an oversight, but also, I'll just say it, we're nice. We try very hard to accommodate people to a fault, I think, sometimes, and that causes other kinds of pressures, and we've got to kind of be careful about that. We also have fairly large walk limits. They're not enshrined in policy, except for the exceptions where we have some shorter ones out in the countryside. For the reasons that they're there. But the ministry recommends 4 kilometers for younger students and 4.8 kilometers for older students. And I got to tell you, I think that's a long ways to expect a child to walk in both cases. And I'm thinking a little bit about a primary age student, maybe they're 53 pounds, including their backpack, and you're asking them to walk that far. I don't like that very much. I think as a parent that's kind of far. And so I would like to see our official walk limits get stated, but also be much more user-friendly than that, much tighter than that, and only expect people to walk a certain distance. But then we should enforce those walk limits. What we have right now are those fairly large ones. It's not really stated. It's kind of a little bit all over the place. And then we let people on the bus maybe when we shouldn't. So we've got to kind of work through some of these idiosyncrasies. We've also historically added routes to accommodate courtesy riders, and we need to work on that one as well. And you've heard that from us if you've been on any presentations. We have 2,000 students on buses, and if you actually look at what we're supposed to be doing, we have a lot more people riding buses, and we traditionally have added routes to add those courtesy riders, and that's not what a courtesy rider is supposed to be. It's supposed to be you get a ride when there's room and only when there's room. So more to follow on that. So what you can expect is staff goes to board in the future. We're not ready to do this yet. Smaller walklets, more walk limits, tighter, right? More consistent enforcement, like we want to be doing, these responses consistently across the district. Caps on legacy busing, so we'll say it at some point, not yet. This many years, we'll continue to drive you, and then we're going to do that. And then firmer standards for courtesy riders, and propose a phased-in approach over the next 3 years. And once again, because this is tied up in board purview, it doesn't mean that we're going to do it. It means we're going to take this information to the board and bring some recommendations to them, and we will do that later. Why haven't you done this earlier? Of course, is the question. I think Please note that our use of the new software has expanded our understanding of the rosters and the routing. You understand, our whole busing system was made on napkins, and I'm not even exaggerating. And, we were paper-based until a few years ago, and we've got more digital. We've started to use this program, and we're recognizing so many things, learning so many things that we didn't know a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And so in doing so, we're going to be able to build some more efficiency. I think we've already improved service in a number of ways because of the software. We got shorter ride times for kids. And I'm going to say this at the next board meeting, our later start times and shorter ride times have, I think, been a real boon to attendance. And I've got some data that shows a bump up this year in attendance. So it's helpful in that way, but it'll also help us be more consistent and more efficient in the future, and allow us to use that limited funding that we have in a more judicious way, I think. So I can see Trustee Carol Kellogg, and so I'm going to turn the meeting over to her. I think we have some opportunities here for some talk. And actually, what I'm going to do, actually, before I take this slide down, I'm going to just say, and we'll put this up at the end too. Here's the facilities planning at sd69bc.ca. That's the email address that I have. It comes into my email box. Try not to be mean if you send me an email. Sometimes, people, this is not the time to be too candid. Try to be measured. But, tell us what you think, or tell us something that maybe we need to know. And then this survey is going to be available on our website. And if it's not up now, I'll make sure that Karen Hurt has it up. And it should be, I've set it to be active any minute now. And I'll go in and check it when the meeting's over, and it should be accepting survey responses as soon as this evening. So that's a great place to go. And that one asks you, where you're from, where your kids go to school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it gives you a chance to, provide your comments. So back here, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you.
And I'm going to stop talking for a moment. I'm going to have a drink of water. Over to you, Ms. Kellogg.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is the part of our presentation where if people have questions or they have a conversation that they want to share with the board, then this is the appropriate time for that. So if you have a question, please put your hand up.
I don't see any hands yet. Oh, there's one.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, that's one of ours.
Yeah. Trustee Austin.
I was waiting to see if there'd be somebody else, but I'll jump in. Peter, I'm just wondering if for all of us, actually, you could explain the difference between nominal capacity and operating capacity and how the province views those.
Yeah, great question. And I should have got my firm definitions down. And so I'm going to, and if Phil Monroe's on this call, and maybe when I start to go in the wrong direction, he can interrupt me. But my understanding is that nominal capacity is basically based on a raw calculation. You say, take 24 kids, and these are the numbers of standard classrooms that you have, and you're going to end up with a number that looks like that. And then operating capacity is a more precise number that uses the possible spaces in a more maximal way. Am I getting it? Am I getting it, Phil?
Almost. So basically the nominal capacity is the way that the school was designed and built when it was the as-built, the class configuration. And then, as you mentioned about the class sizes for kindergartens compared to grade 7s, the operating capacity is, have we changed wood shops at old middle schools? And then that operating capacity would go up.
Yeah, we're in the process right now of reviewing all this. We're operating on fairly, it's not current information, but it's a little harder to figure out what the actual, what we think is the actual capacity is. And Mr. Monroe, you've got somebody working on this currently, and we're partway through this process. We're just not finished. Is that fair?
Fair, and we would have all this information by Friday.
Okay. And so when the board is asked to make this decision, this can be part of the package.
Correct.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Monroe. Thank you, Trustee Austin. Randy Bryant, you have a question?
Yeah, just we're out in the Arrington area, and I kind of jumped on this because we're kind of unclear to what's going on with our kids out here, and heard that our catchment was originally Ballenas. I think myself and some other parents that we've spoken to are interested in having our kids go out to KSS as they're leaving elementary school this year. Is that still an option in all of this, or?
Right. Originally, the first version of this, and this is why I don't like to go public with the drafts, because we had some uncertainty about it. But there was the Hilliers area on the other side of the highway, or your side of the highway, I guess, that we were considering, having to change. We cut that off, and so let me. Anyway, I won't bring the slide back up. But if you remember the shape of it, it used to have this extension over the new highway into Hilliers. We took that out because it wasn't, it just was going to be a giant hassle in a number of ways. We were going to get maybe 5 kids moving. The buses, it was going to mess up the busing. It just didn't seem like it was a good idea. So if you're on the other side of the highway, there's no changes to you. Does that help? The non-water side of 19, there's no shifts this year.
So our catchment would remain Ballenas for now. We'd have to apply for out of catchment to send the kids to Qualicum.
If you're on the other side of the highway, it is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. I do not see any further questions. Just let me see.
Surely somebody wants to be on the recording.
I see no
besides me.
I see no further hands, Doctor. Oh, I do. Trustee Young.
Yeah, I think Marina had something in chat. I just want to make sure that got answered.
I think she was just, I looked at that. It looks as though she was just stating that she's having it scribed.
No, there's something underneath.
I've been invited by Joel. I'm here to record and call and deliver. No?
No, there's something underneath it. Something
No.
about
can you
posting?
paste the survey link into the chat?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we can.
She was asking Karen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that Karen can do that.
I do not have a link.
Well, okay. I mean, I probably could do that, but it will only help the people that are literally on this call right now. They wouldn't be able to access that through the recording. So I would recommend that people go back to the website and go into the link that way. Is that a better idea, Karen?
When I get the link, yes.
Yeah, okay. As soon as we're offline, you and I are going to be online together, and we're going to make sure this is up and running. And then you will do a survey, and you will make sure it works. Because I've done it. I've done lots of testing myself, but that only means so much.
Right. So I see no further questions. I'm going through. I see no further hands up. So do you have a conclusion that you would like to do, Dr. Jory?
Let me just, I will put this slide back up here. Well, I'll try to anyway. Oh, no, it doesn't want to do it. Hang on a second. I just want to. There it is. There it is again, and I'm going to put that up there. There's the facilities planning at ST69. Facilities planning at st69.bc.ca. That goes directly into my inbox now, and as soon as we're offline, we're going to make sure that link is on our website in this slider, and that if you're interested in being part of the survey, you can go right into that and participate in the survey. Okay. And just thank you. Thanks for joining tonight. Thanks for being a part of the conversation, and thank you in advance for your emails or your survey responses should you participate. And we will keep that survey open for a few weeks. And so you don't need to do it right away, but maybe try to get to it in the next few days, I think, before you forget. It's out of sight, out of mind. Thank you.
Right. And I want to thank everybody for coming today. This gives us an opportunity as the Board of Education to look at things, see the surveys when they come in. And I want to thank you, Randy, for your question. And I think we can call the meeting, and I want everybody to have a great evening. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.